Kendrick Lamar is on the latest cover of Harper's Bazaar.
Yep.
And
By himself.
by himself, it is only the fifth time that a man has been by himself on the cover of Harper's Bazaar.
And it
So
hasn't happened in a long time.
that is historical for the magazine. Um,
They good over
also,
there, everything.
they're doing they're doing work in they're doing work next door. So all I
Ah,
hearing is like drilling and sawing and whatever. So SZA, one of our other beloveds, SZA interviewed Kendrick Lamar for Harper's Bazaar.
the homie.
Yes. So apparently he said that he is more communicative and more comfortable when he has a connection with someone. So he asked that SZA interview him rather than
And if you want the interview, you're gonna say
right.
yes.
So it was basically supervised by a writer at Harper's Bazaar. She wrote the intro, but SZA is the one who actually um, asked questions and had the conversation, which I thought was pretty cool. And uh, the writer from Harper's Bazaar does say that in the article when she writes the intro to the article. She says she can tell that there was. I'm saying she. I'm not sure. I think it's a she, but um, she can tell that there was an energy shift when SZA walked into the room versus when she walked in.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, that's his people, so it's
That's why I
understandable.
said, yeah, the homie.
Yeah. So, and I think they were doing, it sounds like they're doing a movie together or something like that that's coming out at some point. So she immediately walked in and made a joke with him and all that. Y'all can read it. But yeah, so she interviewed Kendrick. She asked him about not like us. She
That's what's
asked
all
him,
over the internet.
yeah, yeah, and he basically explains what, the whole idea behind Not Like Us means. Um, what do you
And
think of
and
this?
well, I didn't read the article, but I know some things.
Right. So,
I know he said that he hates to admit it, but he's been crying a lot more lately,
hmm
getting in touch with his manhood, his vulnerability.
he said it's part of growth.
It's part of growth. And then Scissor asked him, this might seem like a weird question or something, but what the fuck does not like us mean?
hmm
And he says basically, it's a song that is for people like me, people who live like me or something like that. And she says, well, what does that mean? And he starts saying all these good traits and that sum up to a man of integrity.
hmm
Traits that the other guy, his opponent, has been said to not have.
Right.
And so, once again, Kendrick is busting shots.
Yeah. I'm trying to find that part.
I think it's cool that he had his homie interview him.
hmm
Um, I mean, I think we need both. Um, that article has started a conversation online about who should be interviewing who. Should journalists be interviewing people? Should peers be interviewing people?
hmm
Um,
We've seen both happen in the past.
yeah, I think we need both. Or rather, I think both are okay. I don't think it should be one or the
Yeah.
other. Yeah, as an artist, it's cool to sit with Dashing D or one of my other friends and talk about the music that I have coming out or whatever project. That's cool. But I think that there's different questions going to be asked by
Yeah.
different type of people, right? And so if Elliot Wilson sat down with me, Elliot Wilson is going to ask very different questions than Dashing D. Does it mean that Dashing D is incapable of being a journalist, of digging deep and asking certain questions? No, it does not mean that. But there are different questions that are going to be asked by different types of people. And I think to get the full scope, we need both,
Yeah,
right?
I
And
agree.
so, because the conversation has become, should artists be sitting with their peers? Should basketball players be sitting with their peers, etc., instead of journalists? And I think both are helpful in different ways. I think your homie is gonna ask you about some shit that they know about, some shit they know you probably want to speak about, some shit that they could get from you that someone else cannot. But the journalist is also gonna ask you questions that are more niche based
Mhm.
and are going to come from a different angle. And they too may ask questions that make you dig deep in different ways, right? And so, no, your homie is probably not going to ask you, okay, Jay, who's your top five? And sure, that's a question you're going to hear a lot in a hip hop conversation with a journalist. But a hip hop journalist is also going to ask you about things that they're not going to ask you about if they're your friend, marketing and the process of making the album and the
Yeah.
transitions that you're making and your career and what made you do certain things. Your homie may not ask you those questions, not because they're incapable, but because they're looking at this more as, let's get into the nooks and crannies of the artist to artist thing, right? If I sit with one of my peoples who do music, they're going to ask me some very specific music based questions,
Mhm.
especially if they know, hey, this is largely to speak about the project you have coming out or the single you have that has a buzz. They're going to ask different questions than, hey, what's your relationship with so and so? They're not going to ask you that, not because
Well,
they're incapable, but because they probably are looking at things from a different lens. And I think we need both. I know this is really not the topic, but this has become a byproduct of this article. There's this new thing that's, oh, should we be sitting with each other or journalists? I think both is my answer.
I think it depends on what the publication is trying to, or the show, or whatever it is trying to do. Um, I think that this is unique in the sense that he asked for this specifically because he felt like he would be more honest with someone he was close to, someone he
You
had
believe that?
a rapport with. I don't know. That's what he said. So that's what's in the article.
No, I
So I'm
understand that.
I'm going off of that. I personally I don't know. I don't know a lot about him doing interviews. So I don't have anything to compare it to
I
to
think
to, to make a decision on that. Um
I think it's true that you're going to be more comfortable with your friend, but I also think as Kendrick in the position he's currently in, this was a bit of a shot call. This was a bit
yeah,
of, oh,
of course.
if you want to sit with me, this is how it has to happen,
But also, yeah, you might be more comfortable with your friend, but the point of an interview is not your comfort.
which is why I
So,
think we need both.
right, because yes, I do think that there are, especially when you're a certain caliber of celebrity, that you're afforded certain um,
Luxuries.
leniency. Your leniency is based on what you're willing to say and not say. I think the more um, up there you are, the more you can dictate how things go, or what you're willing to say and what you're not willing to say. But at the same time, journalists are seeking fact. So they're not always going to ask you the comfortable questions. They're not always going to ask you things that make you feel nice and fluffy and fun, but they're also going to ask you things that are serious, that are deep, that actually, and journalists are also going to look for the angle that maybe no one has found yet.
Right.
So I agree with you. I think both are okay. Um, I think in a publication like Harper's Bazaar, I could understand why Kendrick Lamar wants to be interviewed by
SZA.
SZA. However, what I will say is, what we need to be careful with is taking opportunities away from journalists of color, because I think that's also an angle that should be explored in moments like this.
Right.
Because yes, there is a difference between the way we tell our stories and stories about our own. So I know when Beyonce was on the cover of Vogue, she was very intentional about she's Beyonce. She was able to be a lot more involved. But there
Right.
was a lot of intention behind who would take her photos, who would write the article. And
Right.
I think we have to be I think artists have to be celebrities have to be open to it being a journalist who will do right by who they are and
Okay.
act with integrity, and yes, write a story that is based in fact, but also, like, I don't know, because this could have gone very differently, and this could have been like, this was very much about like energy and what do you think about this, and I like it. I like the conversational nature of the interview, but it would have been a different interview if a journalist had done it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And the journalist is not going to ask you to explain "Not Like Us" so you could keep dissing Drake.
Well, but a journalist may ask you to explain Not Like Us, but maybe for different reasons than why SZA. SZA was the one to ask that. I
I
think
don't.
they
I don't think it would have been done in the same way.
probably
She
not in
asked
the
him, "What
same
does
vein.
it mean?" And he
Yeah.
said, basically, people who are like me, and if they're like me, the song resonates with them. It probably would have been left right there.
Well, he said this. He said, well, she said, "Can I ask you a hypermasculine question? You can also tell me to shut the fuck up. What does Not Like Us mean to you?" Which I didn't totally understand why that was a hypermasculine question, but and he said, "Not Like Us is the energy of who I am, the type of man I represent. Now, if you identify with the man that I represent," and she said, "Break the man down for me." He said, "This man has morals. He has values. He believes in something. He stands on something. He's not pandering. He's a man who can recognize his mistakes and not be afraid to share the mistakes, and can dig deep down into fear based ideologies or experiences to be able to express them without feeling like he's less of a man. If I'm thinking of Not Like Us, I'm thinking of me and whoever identifies with that." And then she starts to ask him about, she basically says that people think he's angry. And she says that he's an angry person. And she says that she's never found that his energy was coming from an angry place. So they start getting into that about whether he thinks he's angry or not.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
know if he's angry. I don't think anybody ever thought that, but okay.
but
Point.
that's
My
kind
point
of the
was that.
point, right? Go ahead.
Right. No, I was going to say my point is that I don't think that second question was going to be asked by a journalist. I think that's your homie giving you the space to, yeah, go ahead, shit on dude some more.
Maybe. Maybe. I mean, I guess at this point we'll never know, but like I said, I think it's okay that it's conversational, and it's more familiar between the two of them. I think that's fine. I think I would also very much appreciate watching or listening to and or reading. I don't know why I couldn't get there.
It's
I
all
would
good.
also enjoy reading an interview between him and a journalist who asks different questions. Um, I think that would be just as interesting as this was. But I think it was well done, and the images of him are great. Um, yeah, so listen, he is riding high right now, and good for him. He's getting ready for the Super Bowl,
Yep.
and it is fastly approaching at this point.
Yes,
So, this is great. This is great.
I agree.